Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm with you till 7 o'clock alongside me, Lord Daniel Moylan. It says Lord in capital letters. Is that you insisting that I say Lord and I add it?
No, I haven't. They never asked me anything. And
Really? Well, anyway, Lord Moylan is alongside me and Jonathan Liss, not yet a Lord.
By day, they probably have it.
Bound to happen.
Never say never. That's what we say. Look, we've just been talking about Germany a second ago. Over in Germany, the chairman, the Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, he has been looking at, of course, we all now know that horrendous attack on that diversity festival. That has really kind of sharpened people's minds and their thoughts when it comes to actually talking about some of the issues that they're facing in Germany. Now the Chancellor, he has been looking at whether or not you can prevent now migrants that are in Germany that have entered via a different European Union country, whether or not you can start slashing some of their benefits that they receive. Bed, bread and soup, was it the other one?
Soap.
Soap. There you go. Bed, bread and soap. That's tricky for my accent.
That's
what he wants to restrict the benefits to. Should we be following suit? What do you think to this?
Well, I think, first of all, it's very interesting what's happening in many European countries. And I think when the Labour government see what many of these countries are starting to do, and they've already started doing in some countries, we're going to look very, very soft, and they'll be horrified at what their European brethren, whom they're trying to get close to, are doing. This latest attack, just at a time immediately before quite sensitive elections in the eastern Länder of Germany, the old communist bloc states, has had a profound effect. And I think what we're seeing is governments moving away from a period during which they tacitly welcomed immigration and refugees, illegal or otherwise, because they thought they had an economic problem and they saw this as essentially an economic solution to an economic problem, to one where they realize that actually people are not goods, people are not just economic units, and that they have the migration of populations can have profound effects on the way in which societies see themselves and behave. And their reaction to that is going to be much harsher towards migrants. Now, I'll get shot completely for saying this, but you know, if you're living in the Middle East and you flee because of some terrible war, or you're in parts of the Horn of Africa and you flee because of some terrible war into another country, what will normally happen is that the country there and the United Nations will set up a camp in which you will be able to live, and you'll be given sustenance and education for the children and so on, if it's a longer-term thing. Because eventually the idea is you should be able to return to your own country when it's safe. That's what refugees are. They're people who are driven out, who are meant to be, returning to their own country when it's safe. We don't have that attitude here at all. We say if somebody's a legitimate asylum seeker, they get permanent residence and from day one and they can live in the country. Maybe we should be thinking in the way that Scholz is obviously thinking about something more like that, where people who are displaced, are very unfortunately, because of these terrible incidents, are looked after in camps for as long as they need to be, and then can return to their own country when their
I don't think he's planning to deport anybody after a certain period of time, though.
He's already announced he's deported a whole load of people back to Afghanistan.
Yes, but people who've been granted...
No, I don't think anyone is suggesting that people have already been given permanent residence. He's saying that people who arrive in the future who have come from another EU country, a safe country, which would be, in Germany's case, nearly all of them, because they come in through the Mediterranean and arrive in Germany later, the great majority, that those people will no longer get any benefits.
No, the question
then is, what are you going to do with them? Because if all you do give them is bread, soap and whatever, then, they're not going to be able to live. They've got to be housed somewhere. So,
well, bed is what the other things.
The clue is in the bed bit. We'll be given a bed.
Look, if you were having this conversation in Greece or Italy, the conversation would be a little different than if you're having it in Germany or indeed Britain. And for those countries who bear the brunt, and Malta as well, for those countries who bear the brunt of this crisis, because they're the first port of call, the Dublin Convention, which means that that asylum seekers have to stay or are meant to stay in the first EU country they arrive in, is very unfair because they are shouldering the biggest burden. And in Greece's case, it's not a particularly rich country by EU standards. So it's absolutely fair, I think, that you can have something along the Dublin Convention if all member states agree to it. But also, there's something called solidarity, which means that countries are meant to shoulder their fair share of a problem. And so Germany has, to be fair, done that very well over the last 10 years. And we know that Angela Merkel let in a lot of Syrian migrants, and a lot of people criticise her for that now. I think it was an act of great political courage, and I think it was the right thing to have done, given what was happening in that country at that time. So, look, you will always have a tiny, tiny minority of people of all ethnicities and backgrounds who will do terrible things. And I don't think it's right that after one person does something terrible, that should therefore dictate policy. And because if you do that, then that's a form of collective punishment. I think that's always wrong.
Jonathan, I don't think you're quite on the point.
Can I just respond though to one of your points that you just made? Because you were just saying that, Angela Merkel, when she was in come on, come on, and she expanded and welcomed loads of people from Syria and so on and so forth in order to plug her own gaps in her own labour market. I will just say there will be people screaming at their television sets and talking about things like those mass sex attacks on New Year's Eve, for example. So whilst you might think that there'll be a lot of people celebrating that move, there'll also be a lot of people that will raise humongous question marks about what did that actually do domestically to safety within Germany, that move. So I do want to just make that point. But anyway, carry on. What is it you wanted to say?
I don't think... Jonathan, I think, is not quite on the point. The point is not, are people going to arrive as a result of being displaced? I mean, a lot arrive not because they're displaced, but because they're willing to pay, in our case, £3,000 or £4,000 for a trip across Europe and over the Channel because they see better opportunities. But there will be some, and Syria might have been an example at the time that Angela Merkel was Chancellor, where people are driven out because their lives are intolerable and they're in a condition of danger because of a civil war that's going on. And the question is, when they arrive, do you, acknowledging that they are genuine refugees from a serious crisis, do you then say the result of that is that you can not only enter our country, but you can have permanent residence and become part of the labour force and settle here permanently? Or is it what they would do if they arrived in, say, Jordan, a peaceful country, and they would, where they would no doubt be put in camps and supported and sustained with a view to going back to Syria at the end of the crisis? Now, that is the point, I think.
Okay, well,
because what has happened is that up until now, the former has been driven not merely by compassion and solidarity, but driven by an economic attitude which saw them as substitute workers for a falling birth rate. The social consequences of that are now becoming apparent. And I think I'm not talking about simply individual crimes of murder, as in Solingen, but the social consequences more broadly are now becoming apparent. And I think people are having a very different view.
I think that economic migration is a good thing, and we can have a conversation about that. But actually, the majority of people who come here are considered to be legitimate asylum seekers, but some 76% at the last count. So actually, I think it's a false debate. And I do also encourage you to look at the history of migration. My own great-great-grandparents were, you might call them refugees from Eastern Europe who are suffering pogroms. You might call them economic migrants. They were, in fact, both. But the idea that...
They were tiny numbers.
No, they were not tiny numbers at all. The waves of migration... The waves of migration at the end of the 19th century were absolutely enormous. And you had people fleeing from very difficult circumstances, racial discrimination, and also economic migrants. The idea that those people should have somehow gone back to Eastern European countries, or indeed, after the Second World War, the idea that they should have gone back to Poland or Germany or whatever, is completely not in keeping with any kind of reality of lived experience.
Can I give some...
I'd just say the waves, you are not claiming that by, say, 1910, at the end of the 19th century, once it was all over, 10% of the population of the United Kingdom had been born abroad.
Well, I don't know what
those are the sorts of figures we're talking about.
Well, hang on, never mind 19%.
Nothing like that.
Let me move forward into 2024.
These are not enormous, Wade.
Because in this country, right here, in the here and now, get this, everyone, 1.6 million migrants apparently live in Britain that are unemployed, not actively looking for work. They cost the taxpayer, you and I, an estimated £8 billion per year. What do you think to this?
Well, I don't think it matters that they are...
It matters to me. It matters to lots of the viewers that they're paying for people that are not...
Here I'm probably going to be on the same side as Jonathan. I don't think it matters that they're migrants. Once we've decided, as in my view was wrongly decided, that on fundamentally economic grounds, because, you know, we can't think of people as people. We only think of them like they're in the same box as if they were a box of goods. Once it was decided to let them in and they were legitimately allowed to stay here permanently and to work, inevitably they are then going to be passing through periods of unemployment and eventually into retirement. And to say that they're economically inactive...
these are not asylum seekers, by the way. No, to be clear about those.
No, these are people who've been legitimately let into the country at their request with our permission. And we have given them that permission. But they fit into a bigger box, and the bigger box is the number of people who are economically inactive, who are both migrants and not migrants, people who are not migrants at all. And we have far too many people who are economically inactive, whether they're migrants or not. And that's the issue that we need to address. And again, it's one where the Conservatives, you know, we have Mel Stride canvassing to become leader of the party. He was in charge of work and pensions. But nothing was done, as far as I could tell, in the last year to try and address this problem, even though it's very well flagged up. And I have every expectation that Labour is going to run away from the problem as fast as it can, because they'd rather have more immigration than get people who are living here back into work. Many of them can do that, can go back.
I mean, look, the first thing...
And it's nothing to do with migrants.
The first thing to say about this, Michelle, is that the figure you're quoting comes, as I understand it, from a think tank. There's no evidence...
The Centre for Migration...
Yes, so that's what they've estimated. But there are some people who don't work, who don't cost the taxpayer anything at all because they have independent means, or they are raising a family and their partner is bringing in a cross for them both. A lot of these people are dependents or partners of migrants. A lot of them, actually, I think these are non-UK citizens. So there are actually people who are born here, who are born to people who are migrants, who still don't have UK citizenship. They have permanent right to indefinite leave to remain, etc. So the figures, I would always mistrust them. And also, I agree with Daniel, of course, he was right on this, that it doesn't actually matter. I think it's a false boundary between sort of a non-UK citizen and a UK citizen. It doesn't matter. There are lots of reasons why people may not be working. For the reasons I've already given, also a lot of people have caring responsibilities. A lot of people, yes, may be in long-term sickness. It happens. Do
you think that anyone, irrespective of their background, whether they're, whatever background, is irrelevant, if you're working age and you're able-bodied, able-minded, and you're physically able to go to work, do you think you should ever be able to live on welfare as a choice?
Well, I just disagree with the premise of the question. I really don't think there are a lot of people in this country who are living...
It's a great question.
Well, it may be a great question. I'm disagreeing with the premise of it, which is that not a lot of people are treating benefits as a lifestyle choice.
We know that after COVID, there was a very significant jump up in the number of people of working age who were claiming benefits. And that number has stayed at an elevated level since COVID.
Yes.
So that's what you need to address. It's almost certain that many of those people could work.
I'm conscious of time. I've got to go to break in a second because I need to talk about two-tier NHS. Don't worry about that. But just as a principle, do you think anyone that's able to work, physically, mentally, able to work, so you're not caring for whatever, do you think you should ever be able to live on welfare?
Michelle, over half of people who work are on benefits. Well, no, it's of the half. Yes, I think half the people who are on benefits are actually working.
But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about people. You know what I'm asking you. Do you think you should ever be able to choose not to work, not to be self-sufficient, and instead choose to rely on the state if you're able to provide for yourself?
I just don't think there are people who are doing that.
Well, I think you need to get out more.
There are tons of
I think you need to get out more,
obviously there are
This is how the system always
very small numbers of people who abuse the system.
This is how the system always operates.
Michelle, let me put it to you this way. If there are people who are abusing the system, they should obviously not be abusing the system. I just disagree with the scale that is kind of so present.
I didn't give you a scale. I just asked you a simple question.
Obviously, I don't think that people should be cheating. I don't think that people should be cheating the benefit system. Absolutely.
The principle was always that if you lost your job, you got unemployment benefit for a limited period.
There used to be. I mean, call me old-fashioned. There used to be a bit of shame.
And then you were on your own
with having to go down and rely on the job centre or whatever.